Who would have thought the fall would come so fast? In just a few days, what once looked like the blueprint of a dynasty collapsed right in front of our eyes. The elimination at the hands of the Knicks already stung, no doubt, but what truly crushed all remaining hope was the muffled sound of Jayson Tatum's injury in Game 4, a torn Achilles tendon, and with it, perhaps the rupture of an entire era. Let's be honest, the Boston Celtics aren't just in trouble, they're standing at a brutal crossroads. The projected payroll for 2025-26 is nearly $493 million, a staggering number, even for a championship team. But now, without Tatum, that number shifts from difficult to absurd. And the worst part, no one seems ready to accept the obvious. Is Brad Stevens really going to keep patching this roster up with tactical band-aids? Or is it finally time to admit that this team needs something deeper, a radical surgery? Maybe the Celtics won't put Tatum or Jaylen Brown on the market just yet. But the uncomfortable truth is that no one is untouchable. And that includes the very pillars of a project already starting to crack at the edges. Let's take a look at one trade proposal that's starting to gain traction and could be just the first domino in a larger teardown. Trade 1. Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks. Let's be blunt, this package doesn't match Porzingis' raw talent, but does he still hold that value? Porzingis arrived in Boston with the aura of a tactical savior, elite spacing, rim protection, constant mismatch creation. But between recurring injuries and evident physical limitations, he's become a question mark. And right now, he's more of an expiring contract than a core piece. That's why turning him into a first-round pick and shedding tens of millions in luxury tax penalties might be the unpopular but necessary move. But is Terrence Mann really worth taking on a 3-year contract? What if Niang turns into just another bench body, while Porzingis thrives in Atlanta? Are the Celtics truly ready to trade away a player with all-star upside for spare parts and a pick that guarantees nothing? On the flip side, the Atlanta fit is intriguing, with so many young players still struggling with their shooting, like Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, and Zachary Rizicher. Adding a big man who stretches the floor could unlock that offense. Maybe KP no longer has the physical tools to anchor a defense, but his shooting stroke is still very real. And let's be honest, the name Porzingis still carries enough weight to keep Trae Young invested in Atlanta's project. This trade might seem small right now, but it cracks open a dangerous door, the one where you start to admit this core might have reached its ceiling. And that's when the hard questions start to surface, the ones few people dare to ask. Can Jaylen Brown really carry a team without Tatum for a full season? Is it worth keeping Derek White at 30 if next season ends up being a gap year? And if Al Horford re-signs, will he bring leadership or just add to the salary burden? If the Celtics are truly going to embrace a transition year, maybe they need to go deeper. Maybe it's time to package more veterans, chase draft picks, bring in young talent with high ceilings, even if it means falling in the standings for a season. Yes, that might sound like heresy for a franchise with 18 championships. But what if the only way to reach number 19 is to accept a hard reset? Jrue Holiday, the symbol of defense, leadership, and sacrifice, might be the next piece sacrificed on the cruel chessboard of reconstruction. Yes, you read that right. Jrue Holiday, the same player who shut down Luka Doncic in the finals and seemed like the cherry on top of a championship roster, is now at the center of trade rumors that would have sounded borderline heretical just a year ago. But does it still make sense to hold on to him? Trade. Proposal. Celtics receive Wendell Carter Jr., Yusuf Nurkic Magic. Receive Jrue Holiday. On paper, it looks like a mere salary dump. But beneath the surface lies a silent admission. Boston is preparing for an entire season without Jayson Tatum and must reevaluate everything, even its deepest convictions. What no one wants to say out loud is that Holiday has aged, and quickly. His offensive impact has noticeably declined, and although he remains a defensive force, paying nearly $100 million over the next 3 years for a player who no longer commands the offense is a luxury the tax-strangled Celtics simply can't afford anymore. Worse, Holiday's contract has become toxic under the NBA's new second apron rules. His market has shrunk. He's still respected, maybe even too much, but no longer seen as a game changer. The Celtics know it. Other teams know it. The idea of Holiday in Orlando feels strange. A young, rising team built on defense and athleticism. Yes, but does it really make sense to pair an expensive veteran with Jalen Suggs to form the most suffocating backcourt in the NBA? It might work defensively, but offensively it's a game of Russian roulette. Holiday is not a primary playmaker. He can space the floor, drive, and defend like few others, but the Magic need offensive structure, something he no longer delivers consistently. This raises the uncomfortable question: is Orlando viewing Holiday as a future trade asset rather than a foundational piece? Now consider this. If Porzingis leaves and Al Horford is on the doorstep of retirement, Boston desperately needs a big man. Wendell Carter Jr. becomes a logical target. Young, versatile, cost-effective, and stylistically similar to Horford. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Carter has always had potential, but also a recurring battle with injuries and inconsistency. He never blossomed into a star in Orlando. So if he couldn't break out there, why would he in Boston? A place with 10 times the pressure? And more critically, are the Celtics just plugging holes with another average player to save money instead of building a truly competitive core for when Tatum returns? Charlotte's involvement in the deal might seem purely financial, but it carries implications. Caldwell Pope heads there, and the young, identityless franchise suddenly acquires a veteran with immediate impact. But that raises another debate. Are the Hornets rebuilding or quietly trying to compete? 2 draft picks, 28 and 46, help justify the deal. But the real intrigue is how teams are already twisting themselves into knots to avoid the new salary cap restrictions. And that alone is reshaping the market in dramatic fashion. The trade itself might seem logical on the surface, but it exposes the gap between what the Celtics were and what they are becoming. There's no room left for sentimentality, no space to keep every beloved player. The focus now is surviving the 2025-26 season with dignity and preparing the ground for Tatum's triumphant return in 2026-27. But here's the harsh truth. Will Tatum even want to return to a team that looks nothing like the one he left? Will Jaylen Brown, who has previously voiced discomfort with the front office's decisions, remain committed to a franchise that's tearing down its roster in the name of financial flexibility? And more provocatively, what if trading Drew Holiday is just the first domino in a disguised teardown that could push the Celtics into a spiral of mediocrity, wrapped in the language of smart restructuring? What once looked like a championship-ready roster, built for a dynasty, is now tiptoeing toward a quiet collapse. Holiday's contract, Tatum's injury, Horford's age, Porzingis's uncertainty. The warning signs are all there, yet few are willing to face the truth head-on. Amid an offseason that already promises to be one of the most chaotic of the Brad Stevens era, a proposal has emerged that, at first glance, borders on heresy: trading Derek White. Yes, that Derek White, one of the pillars of the 2024 championship, the same player who sealed games with suffocating defense and clutch shots. But what if I told you this might be the boldest and perhaps the most necessary move to keep Boston at the top? In this scenario, White would head to the Dallas Mavericks. In return, the Celtics would receive P.J. Washington, Caleb Martin, Dwight Powell, a 2029 first-round pick via the Lakers, and another one in 2032. In blunt terms, Boston would be giving up its best perimeter defender for 2 solid role players, an irrelevant big man, and 2 long-term draft promises. Derek White is right now one of the most valuable pieces in the NBA, not because he shines like a superstar, but precisely because he's the kind of player every contender needs. Versatile, disciplined, efficient, experienced. But that aura of reliability hides an uncomfortable truth. He'll be turning 32 in the 2026-27 season, and with a contract nearing an expensive extension, the time to extract maximum value is now. with the looming supermax extensions for Tatum, and Brown threatening to explode Boston's salary cap, keeping White might cost more than it seems. The Celtics' future can't be held hostage by sentimentality. And let's be honest, as beloved as he is, White is not untouchable. One of the thorniest arguments behind this deal is the implied bet on Peyton Pritchard as the Celtics' point guard of the future. He just won Sixth Man of the Year. He's young, affordable, and still an enigma. Trading White would clear the path for Pritchard to prove whether he can be that guy. And if he fails, fine. You compromise the season, but you also improve your own draft pick and still hold a valuable asset to move. It's the classic, lose today to win tomorrow. Boston needs those answers now, not when it's too late. Kyrie Irving is injured. Luka Doncic is gone. Cooper Flagg has arrived, and despite all the hype, he's still a rookie. The Mavericks are desperate to build a team that works right now, and Derek White is exactly the kind of player who fits like a glove. Elite defender, steady ball handler, playoff tested. Oh, and he just destroyed Dallas in the finals. Nobody there has forgotten that. But here's a provocation. What if this trade ends up costing the Mavericks their future? Nico Harrison has already been cast as the villain for moving on from Luka. If his next gamble derails Flagg's development, he could become the most hated executive in NBA history. Yes, more than anyone, we're talking about mortgaging the entire future for a now that might not even work. PJ Washington is 4 years younger than White, stretches the floor, defends multiple positions, and could even serve as insurance in case Boston ever has to consider moving Brown. Caleb Martin brings intensity and has already proven in the playoffs that he can swing games. And Powell, just an expiring contract. The real prize here is the 2 draft picks, one of which could become the next big name to keep the competitive cycle going. The strategy is clear. Keep Tatum at the top while refreshing the supporting cast. Open space for new stars to emerge, diversify the assets, and most importantly, buy time. Something that's rare in a franchise obsessed with winning right now. Trading Derek White would feel like ripping out a piece of the team's soul. But maybe that's exactly what this franchise needs to avoid falling into the comfort zone that has crushed so many almost dynasties. The modern NBA doesn't forgive hesitation, and Brad Stevens doesn't seem like the type to flinch. Is Boston ready for a future without White? Can Pritchard really become the heir? What if those draft picks are the key to the next championship run? Or are we looking at a trade that could haunt the Celtics for years to come?